Hello everyone and welcome to His Author's Voice. I am the author, Jack Sanger. Now I spent 3 decades in Norfolk in the United Kingdom, and as I was interested in the whole business of vampirism, I checked to see whether there were any recorded incidents of vampires in the county. And I found some. So I wrote this story. I hope you enjoy it. The Undertakers and Dr. Claverley. Times were hard, you know, even for 2 men with a smattering of education like us. Earning a crust in the Norfolk fields meant hours of sweat for little gain. One evening, Jimmy Jewell and I were drinking his homemade brew, telling each other that we probably would have to try a night or 2 in a workhouse in King's Lynn. See what gives. A bed, 3 hours breaking stone or chopping wood to pay for it. A bit of laudanum. Then go down the docks and try for better pay. Jimmy's a natural natterer, and I like to listen, so we had a good laugh. We got to talking about the incidents of young Norfolk women being attacked in their beds at night. Even dads with guns couldn't protect them. Work of the devil, says I. In the end, we got completely sozzled and woke up to the sweet scent of fallen apples and a couple of porkers snorting about, guzzling the fruit and rooting for worms. Lucky they got plenty, says Jimmy, or they'd have had our legs off us afore we awoke. We better move. The gamer will be checking the orchard soon. He's free with his shotgun, is old Brewerly. Come you on, Tommy. We got over the fence and onto the lane just in time. Brewerly was coming by. He nodded, but I reckon he pretended not to notice the bulging of our pockets. Safe on our way, we chewed the apples, spitting out the rotten bits. It was a good 2 hours to Lynn. We went by Winter's pool and splashed water from its falls on our faces and drank up. They say the workhouse is a rough 'un, I ventured. Never truer, but beggars aren't choosers. About another hour and we come across a coach with a wheel in the ditch. A smart gentleman in a tall hat, black coat and trousers was standing beside it, and what turned out to be his lady wife had her head out of the window looking anxious. Without ado, me and Jimmy levered the wheel back onto the road with a fallen branch. He was most grateful, as was his missus. "And where are you gentlemen going?" he asked. "Lynn, sir," I replied, "looking for work." In truth, I was afeard of him. He had a long pale face with really black eyes, sort of glittery, coal-like. He quickly established we had just come back from war in Burma and seen much death. I'm Dr. Claverley, and that's Mrs. Claverley." He pointed to the charabanc. "Can you read?" "We both can a bit," says I. "And here's my card. I'll be back in Lynn tomorrow. If you haven't found anything, come to the hospital after 6 p.m. and show this card to the porter." And that's how our unlikely relations commenced. We spent one night in the workhouse, sleeping on urine-smelling flock and rats a-squealing. In the morning we chopped wood until midday, ate old rabbit meat and spuds, and then we left. We spent a few hours on the dock, but there were men everywhere seeking labouring work. So we made for the hospital. At a few minutes after 6, we were escorted by the porter to stairs down to the hospital cellars. On the way down, the old man says, "Dr. Claverley was a great surgeon. Lynn was lucky to have him. He was like a god. He mended the living upstairs and attended the dead downstairs. It was like heaven and hell here, he says. The way was lit by the new electrical globes. They were so bright, now and then giving extra strong flashes that hurt the eyes. The porter pressed something in the wall and a loud buzzing started. The door opened and the doctor stood before us. He wore a long yellow robe with a hood and thick dark spectacles, which he removed to speak to us. "Ah, you two, come in." We followed him into a big room, lit like day, though it was twilight in the world outside. Imagine the unrest in our breasts to see a man's naked body on a table, all whole save for the separated head. Now both Jimmy and I have seen all manner of dead bodies, being as we served Her Majesty for 5 years, until very recent. But this was different. All was so clean, and the body so white. The doctor spoke to us like he was a teacher in a board school. He was hoping to use the new electricity to bring life to the dead. Struth, thinks I, when he says that in the future people will not die if surgeons are nearby to galvanize them with electricity. Well, the rest I did not really understand at all, nor Jimmy, because I asked him afterwards. But to cut short this part of the story, he says he wants 2 strong men to do jobs, men who aren't frightened of death and the dead. He says he can see we aren't afraid of the body on the table. He will rent a room for us, clothe us in canvas and leather with peaked caps, and we will do errands around the county and beyond. We'd be undertakers. There'd be coinage for our personal needs. Then he waves a finger. No laudanum, no brothels. Well, it was a miracle to our ears. We'd become proper gentlemen in the space of a day. We were soon expert in the errand business. We ran a fast carriage as far as Norwich, Ipswich, Wisbech and Lincoln. In it there was a big chest full of ice. We collected bodies and bits of bodies for Dr. Claverley. It was by the electric telephone that the doctor got wind of newly dead vagrants bound for pauper graves, and who would not miss a limb or an eye or even a brain. No one checked what was in the bag when it was thrown into the pit. We helped him with the heavy work in the hell vaults and got quite used to the cutting and stitching and the attachments of wiring. So Jimmy and I were doing well. Good rooms, better female company, a good drink at a public house knees up, or at the music hall. Life was good. Well, now comes the heart of my story, the bitter worm in the apple, you might say. Events which prove the meeting with Dr. Claverley was not a chance encounter. Nothing about that man was chance. It makes you wonder if there is no thing called chance in life. Dr. Claverley says he'd been preparing for this day. He has a special job for us, a bit dangerous. The peelers won't like it. We must go to Thetford. There, at the Murderer's Arms, we will meet a woman. She will know you. Take shovels, sacking and torches. Everything must be done at night. When we get there, just as he said, a tangle-haired witch in old rags is standing by the public house sign carrying a hazel twig. She must have been 80 if a day, and spoke no English but some old gypsy tongue. She leaps aboard quickly as fast as a frisky young cat, and soon directs us to our destiny. It's ancient church grounds with a few mounds and smashed stones. The name on a broken wood sign is lit by our torches. Jimmy says it says St. Ethelreda's, but whatever else was once there is now missing. The moon is half attending us through the passing clouds. She wanders among the humps of earth with her twig ready to twitch. "What are you looking for?" asked Jimmy. She touches a copper bangle on her wrist and walks on. Then her twig jumps violent in her grasp. There's no hump there, more a dip in the ground. Then she makes off. Her job done. Jimmy and I dig deep before the shovels clang on something. After sweating hours, it seems, we bring out a heavy coffin. Metal it is. Lid fixed with rivet bolts. We drive the gig over. We drag it on board, rope it and cover it with sacking in case we're stopped. Then it's torches out and a couple of hours of fast loping to King's Lynn. It's not a surprise to us to find Dr. Claverley waiting by the hospital gates. It was the first time we'd seen him agitated. We carried the coffin down to his laboratory, as he called it, and lifted it onto the table on which are many wires coiled ready. Then he goes to his telephone and calls out the words, "It's here." "Gentlemen," he says, "I no longer need your services. Here is pay for 6 more months. He has a pouch of coins on the ready. But first you will be witness to events not seen for 1,000 years. Then you will leave and tell no one what you have witnessed, because to do so will be a sure road to the gallows. Aiding and abetting. Do you understand?" We nod. Jimmy clutches my arm. His eyes are wild, like mine must be. Dr. Claverley takes a hammer and chisel and with the skill of a locksmith beats out the rivets. Seconds it takes. Me and Jimmy are stuck there like our feet are in irons. At that moment Mrs. Claverley comes in a long gown, ghostly white. They stand at either end of the coffin and bowing to each other, they lift the lid. Jimmy and I jump back in horror at what is inside. It is a body, fresh as the day it was alive. There is a stone forcing its door open and a sickle hooked round its throat. But even then we recognize the features. It is Dr. Claverley, in every detail the same as he who stands smiling down looking at it. He laughs at his wife. "As if these superstitious impediments could stop our resurrections." The doctor removes the sickle and stone and begins connecting wires to hands, feet and skull. Jimmy and I are still holding on to each other. We see the doctor make a final assessment of his work. Then he reaches over to make the electricity come through. There's a humming. Suddenly, the corpse gives a start and its eyes burst open. It is enough to remove the shackles from our feet and we run. Out of the vault, up the stairs, out of the building, out of the gates. And, if the truth be known, Jimmy and I are still running. So, there we are. Vampirism in the county of Norfolk. I'm adding it to the magic playlist, where there are 6 other tales for you to consider. If your interests are further afield, there are several dozen short stories on this channel. It helps if you subscribe, so please take a moment and click on the button. Meanwhile, if you like to read as well as listen, then you could go to my website, www.jacksanger.com, and here you will find novels, plays, short stories, free to download. Or if you prefer, donate. It's entirely up to you. So, until the next tale, go in peace. Bye-bye.